Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about Aquaman. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
Ooh, we like to talk about games, but we also like to talk about movies. And in the grand tradition of talking about these DC Extended Universe movies, the most recent one has come out. It's Aquaman, directed by James Wan, starring Jason Momoa, Amber Heard, and Patrick Wilson.
All right, let's do this.
I get to record this episode, Mango.
let's do this. Let's do our pre-spoiler reviews.
Okay. Aquaman is a great movie. It's not a great movie. It's a very good movie. It's got all the regular problems that like a popcorn blockbuster movie has, in the same way that like Ant-Man and the Wasp has, minor problems, but is ultimately a very enjoyable experience. I think Aquaman is right along those lines. It has some minor issues here and there, but at the end of the day, it's a roller coaster ride. And you can really tell that this is a movie with like a lot of like love and passion behind it. The thing that I said to Rachel when we came out of the movie was, I said two things. The first was that was like 6 movies in one. And the second was I was exhausted. Because when I say roller coaster, I mean literally like I don't know, I was just being carried over these peaks and valleys and my emotions were soaring. And it is the biggest movie of 2018, which is very strange to say in a year with Avengers Infinity War, but I don't know, there's just something about like the skies and the scale and the scope of this movie that I thought was awesome and that I thought was great and that I thought was a fantastic inheritor to all of the things that fans of, I think, the DC Extended Universe enjoy, but also just, like, fans of what modern comic book movies look like these days. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's funny you should mention roller coasters because I also felt this movie was roller coaster-ish, but that was mostly because I was sitting in a D-box, which was literally like riding a roller coaster through the movie. I'll share my thoughts on that later because it's not directly relevant to the contents of the film. But I thought the movie was incredibly mediocre. It's interesting that you use the comparison of Ant-Man and the Wasp because that's actually a comparison I was going to make too. I personally like Ant-Man and the Wasp because I really like Paul Rudd. And I had problems with that movie, if you remember. But I think that it's like, I think it's very comparable there. I think it is boring. I thought the dialogue was bad. I thought the plot was like entirely too predictable in a way that like I can't tell if it's maybe I've just seen too many of these, but like everything felt so rote to me. What else did I want to say about it? In terms of scale, I don't know if I'd say it's bigger than Infinity War, but I definitely understand that feeling. We can go into some detail in that later, but I definitely understand what you're getting at, and I will give you that it is at least a very large feeling movie. I personally think it's of all the superhero movies to come out this year, I think it is the one that I would go rewatch last.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and to be fair, this year's been pretty good for superhero movies. And kind of like on an entertainment scale, like not on like a craft scale or anything. I think it's probably the worst one for me. I think you could make a case for it being better than Ant-Man and the Wasp. But
wait, I mean, it's obviously better than Venom on a quality scale. I understand, like Venom is more entertaining.
Yeah, Venom has like a boomerang effect, right? Like
it has like the room value.
Yeah. It's like 10s are entertaining, 1s are entertaining, 5s are dog shit, and I don't think this is quite a 5. But it's definitely less good than the other things I've seen this year. That being said, if you're into superhero movies, if you're into Aquaman, I would say it's worth seeing. And I think honestly maybe it's worth a watch just for kind of like the scenes. I thought some of the effects weren't great, but I thought that like the seascapes were fantastical and actually evoked a lot of like Lucasian Star Wars scapes, right? Like
No, yeah, I definitely think that stuff is really in the I mean, not just Star Wars, but I also think obviously Raiders of the Lost Ark, it has like a little bit of like Indiana Jones. Not even a little bit, right? Like the plot just kind of becomes Indiana Jones for like 45 minutes in the middle, you know, which is part of what I like about, you know, in a way, I guess I agree that it's a very rote movie, but I think that it's broad and it's archetypal in a way that I feel like we've, in a way, gotten away from in like the culture, right? Yeah. And it reminds me a bit of like Titanic, I guess I would say, which is just like a big melodrama where everything is being played to the nines, and I like that, and I like that stuff, right? Like that's like big Shakespearean Greek tragedy kind of acting, that is more I don't know, it's operatic, which is what I always feel like the DNA of comic book movies is.
I mean, and you know, like it's like a space opera that takes place undersea. But like Atlantis is like, it reminded me of like simultaneously like Coruscant and Wakanda. So I like it was like like I said, the visuals alone I think were worth it just to see at least once. They did some really excellent work there. I think that's about all I've got for the pre-spoiler stuff. So unless you wanted to add anything, buddy, this is your official.
I guess I also just want to mention, I think the acting is pretty good. Jason Momoa is, I don't think he has a lot of range, but he plays this thing well, I guess. Amber Heard is coming to play, and Patrick Wilson is kind of like coming to play, and the best part is they all understand what movie they're in which is typically used as kind of a pejorative, but I do mean that in that sense of kind of like high drama, you know. Like, this is the kind of thing that makes me love Michael Shannon in Man of Steel, right? Where General Zod is, like, screaming these, like, he's saying these lines, and they're so dramatic, and he's chewing the shit out of, like, the scenery. That's the stuff that I, like, live for.
Yeah, I felt that a lot out of Willem Dafoe's character.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Willem Dafoe's character, absolutely. But, like, when like, I don't know. There's plenty of stuff in the trailers that shows this. Black Manta, obviously. But you know, any of those lines where it's just like, okay, this is when like the supervillain says like the supervillainy thing really hard, and like he's mad, and you know, or whatever. Any of those kinds of lines, any of that kind of stuff, I thought was really great. It was really awesome. I like that it is a different kind of movie, and this is exactly what I always want to see. I feel like from like this is the kind of variety, right? Like when we talked about Black Panther, 10 months ago, I talked about my fears that Black Panther was just going to be a better Aquaman, and even if I think Black Panther is a better movie, which is true. Black Panther is a better movie. I like that Aquaman is not just Black Panther, but in reverse, it is wholly its own being, even if they do share a plot structure.
Yeah. What would I say? Kind of on that tone point. I feel like in a lot of ways it feels a lot like a stage play. Like in terms of like this operatic quality that you're talking about, like over emoting, that I personally don't like in a movie, but I'm not gonna hold it so much against it.
that stuff is right up my alley, so I get that. Anyway, so I guess spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers. If you haven't seen it, go see it. I don't know if spoilers are actually the end of the world for this movie. Like
I would say spoilers are not the end of the world. Yeah. It is not. So I've talked in the past about kind of like the different pieces of a movie that, or just any story that are like powerful, right? And like how a story can have like, you know, a complex theme or complex characters to make up for kind of like a weak plot or like weak set design. And Aquaman is kind of the opposite of that. It has like a fairly straightforward plot that is very predictable, but like on a world building scale. And I also think that the character arcs are very strong in this movie. You know, like these are the selling points, right? There is a big, strong central character arc that I feel like we haven't seen in kind of any of these superhero origin movies in a while. And a lot of these supporting characters are also getting kind of supporting character arcs. There's small subversions along the way, but they're really not. They're really not anything kind of like big. And this is not a movie that you go into to get a good like plot twist moment. You know?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So this is the end of your spoiler warning. We're gonna jump into it because I think I actually want to address that. I actually wasn't a super big fan of Aquaman's himself's character arc.
Oh, really?
I just kind of felt like I felt like the point about him being like a blunt tool was like which is obviously his arc, right? He goes from being like a warrior to like a king, right? And I got that, but I felt like him being the blunt instrument was not demonstrated sufficiently to us. He told it to us outright. And that, I feel like that happened a lot in this movie, right? Like, this is why I don't like the dialogue in the movie. I feel like they told us a lot of things, and didn't have appropriate amounts of kind of like either.
I'm sorry, that's crazy to me. You don't think that Aquaman trying to completely bypass the plot and challenging Orm to like the Ring of Fire or whatever, that is absolutely the plot's version of him being overconfident and too proud, right?
No, I get that, but I thought that moment wasn't earned either. Like, I felt like that was just like, it felt like that was just there because you can't resolve the plot that simply. Like, that felt like it was there. Like, the impression of Aquaman I had going into that scene wasn't that was who Aquaman was.
Wow. That's really interesting. I absolutely had that impression that that's who Aquaman was, right? Like, he walks into that scene and he takes the challenge or whatever, and then he is scolded then by both Volko and Mira for taking this challenge because they know that he can't, that he can't do it or whatever. But he's not taking the situation seriously, and he's overconfident, and he thinks that he can just solve this problem by punching it a lot, right?
So, if it had played more into he's not taking this problem, like, essentially the core thing that I thought they were trying to resolve with Aquaman, like, the thing that was telegraphed was his reluctance to take responsibility. Right, like
right. No, that is definitely a piece of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but like it felt like that didn't have the kind of like blunt instrument aspect built into it, like initially, right? I feel like you want to set that up with like I don't know, like an opportunity, like you want that. How do I want to put this? Usually, you show it working before it fails, and I don't like. I feel like.
He did show that. That's the submarine scene.
So that's the thing, is that the submarine scene didn't have a different option that he ignored, right? Like, that's like kind of the only route that he had.
Wait, what?
Like,
this is insane to me. He lets Black Manta's dad die.
Yeah, but
that's him not taking responsibility.
That's not the issue I have. It's the Force issue, right? Like, he doesn't have the opportunity to talk Black Manta down. Right, like Black Manta attacks him immediately, and it's like that entire confrontation is forced. Right, like he doesn't have the opportunity to take a diplomatic resolution or like a non-force based resolution. That's just like the resolution that has to occur. Like ideally you kind of like, I think ideally you set it up so that he chooses the force based option and it works out the first time, and that establishes the way he is.
No, but okay. God, that's a really weird point to me. Because, like, so part of this is that his character arc culminates at the end of Act 2 with the Kraken, right? The Kraken is obviously fundamentally stronger than he is and beats him up or whatever and is calling him unworthy. And it is when he truly humbles himself before the Kraken and he says, I am undeserving of this, like, of this crown. That is when he is most deserving of it, right?
See, but so the problem I have with that is his problem was never his humility, right? He has his moment of humility.
No, but it was his humility because he was prideful.
Was he ever like?
Yeah, that's the core piece of his relationship with Orm in the Ring of Fire, is that he is sure that he's just going to be able to beat up Orm and stop this whole thing in its tracks.
So I don't know if I bought that was like a pride thing so much as like he doesn't solve things any other way, right? Like he's that's also not his moment of humility. His moment of humility is when he says, "I'm just a blunt weapon. I'm not qualified to be a king." That's like like he's always been kind of like I am not the right person to be the king. Like he's
right, yeah, I mean, so right. But it's the moment where he accepts that piece of himself is what makes him most deserving to lead, right? Do you see what I'm saying? I understand what you're saying. On that moment on the boat with Mira is like a step in that direction, and she tells him something that he doesn't think about himself, right? Because he is having doubts about all of this stuff, and he just wants to go back to the surface world and try and let them prepare for Orm's attack, because he doesn't think that he can accomplish it, right?
Right.
And she says that your that doubt, that piece of yourself is like the key piece of it, and he accepts that when he goes to the Kraken. That is the moment where he accepts that about himself, because he goes and he pulls out King Atlan's trident, and he becomes, the man who will eventually be king of Atlantis at the end of Act 3. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. So
I really felt like his character arc was super strong in this movie, right? Even just like other small, like there are some small other things. Like I really like the interplay between his arc and Mira's arc, and I like that she gets her own kind of in parallel, right? Like at the beginning, he is just like a means to an end for her, right? She's just using him, but he successfully changes her mind about like the surface world, and it is kind of like unlocking that friendship when they go to Italy or whatever, that allows her to help him get over his bullshit, which I think like I like that interplay.
See, maybe I'll see that like I'm just confusing it not happening with it being so rote that like I was just kind of flippant about it, but like I felt that like Mira's arc was also not great. She's like it's like I hate the surface, and then she goes to he's like I love the surface, right? Like that didn't feel like there was a lot of build there, right? Like it felt like it was like very much like, and then she did the thing that made her like the surface, and it's just like the Little Mermaid, and everybody's happy. And like I don't know, like I said, I'll concede that maybe this is me confusing it not being there with me being just kind of aggravated with how rote it felt.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with that. I definitely think that this is, these are, in a certain sense, they're not even characters. They are archetypes, right? But I think that, especially for Aquaman, where the archetype is, it's not even like 20 years old. This is hundreds of years old. This is the
right.
King Arthur story, obviously.
Yes.
So I don't know. There's something about that just kind of like feels very appropriate. I do think that there are pieces in here that muddy the waters a bit. Like, so for instance, and this is actually a change I don't like because I really like it in the comics. In the comics, Arthur just kills Black Manta's dad in cold blood. It's a little more kind of like, it's contrived in a different sort of sense, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but they just have like a completely different relationship. But Arthur blames Black Manta for his father's death. Obviously, his dad is not dead in this movie. And goes and he kills Black Manta's dad in straight revenge, which I think is and then he kind of has to like live with these, with like the kind of regret of I created my own arch nemesis who has been, hounding me for years and years. And there is a big part of me that wishes that was just kind of how they played it in the submarine scene. I thought that it was a little bit like
so I knew that, and maybe I think I would have bought Arthur as like a blunt tool better if he had actually actively killed.
I know, I was really excited for it because when he ripped the pipe out and he threw it, I was like, yes, this is the moment. But then they go through this whole thing with the torpedo, and I get it because it softens it, right?
Yeah.
But I also think that it kind of removes the edge that makes it powerful, and it also would have worked better in the service of this character arc, because then I think this is true of the submarine story in a sense where Arthur is reacting out of a certain sort of like insecurity. Like the whole front part of the submarine is just, I'm so cool, I'm such a badass, let me beat the shit out of these guys. And
let me tell you, fucking permission to come aboard was the cheesiest motherfucking thing. Like
I mean, okay, you know, we'll address the dialogue thing in a second because I have some thoughts about
sorry.
that. But the culmination of that scene is that Arthur then gets shot with the grenade and it hurts, right? And he really takes a hit. And so the version of that where he's like, I'm so cool and indestructible, look at me, I beat Steppenwolf or whatever. And then this like random guy shoots him with a grenade and he reacts out of anger and impales the guy against a wall completely, you know, without empathy for him because because he like sees that weakness in himself and he hates it or whatever. I think that would have been a lot sort of stronger, but it also would have been a little bit less sympathetic, and it would have been maybe harder to like go from Arthur like murdering someone in cold blood to like taking selfies with a biker's pink phone in the bar or like whatever it is, right?
Yeah, no, I think it could have worked if like instead of the torpedo falling on him, if that like thing sticking him to the wall was the reason that he died, right? Like like I feel like that would have maybe struck the balance a little bit better. Like not directly, right? Like that, like he would have like that he was drowning because of like that he drowned in the same way because of it. I think would have struck the balance a little bit better because it would feel less accidental, right? Like.
Yeah, I actually think that a lot of the flaws of this movie are in the beginning. I think the first act is pretty bad. And that it picks up once once Arthur and Mira hook up and go to Atlantis, then I think it gets basically fine. But like all of the dialogue in the beginning, I very much agree with you, is like super cringy. Like, God, the thing that Nicole Kidman says when she's like about to go, she's like, in the sea, we don't have, or like the sea washes away our tears. And then he's like, up here we feel them. Yeah. Like, oh my God. I love melodrama, you guys, but boy, right? Like that was tough to get through. And in the same way, I think Permission to Come Aboard was like, yeah, that was like pretty cheesy. Like
there were a bunch of lines like that. There was fucking Black Manta's dad like just explaining this story like in the span of 3 seconds about the knife. It's like it's just like, here is the plot, here is your motivation, I'm handing it to you. And like and fucking Mira like when she first walks out of the ocean and is like, you must come to Atlantis because your brother Orm has taken the throne. It just felt very like, it felt very, very blunt and bad. And I think that like, I think the worst one was Willem Dafoe during his fight with Orm, during Aquaman's fight with Orm. I told Atlanta I'd protect him. This is not a fight. This is an execution, which is immediately followed up by like a move that Aquaman, like an exchange that Aquaman wins, right? This is Aquaman throwing Orm to the point where he almost hits the lava, right? Like he says this thing at the point in the fight where like, it appears that Aquaman might actually win. Like it's
no. So okay, the Aquaman gets out of that at the last second. He's being driven down to the lava by Orm, who is using
that was Orm that got thrown down to the lava.
Right before that happens, Aquaman flips it on Orm.
Right, but like
when he is being driven down into the lava though, and Willem Dafoe says that thing, Orm is the one in control, and then Aquaman takes control and throws Orm into the lava, and then Orm whips the lava at Aquaman.
I thought that. I think part of this is that I thought that scene was not the easiest to follow, because I was a little bit confused about what was happening there.
But like which of the two guys was doing what?
Yeah. And I think that like, regardless of like, I think it's a less strong point now, but like I think that was not the like this was not a one-sided fight that Aquaman was losing, right? Like this was like an even exchange until he shatters Atlanta's trident. Which
that's actually interesting. I love the action in this movie. I think this is probably one of the best superhero action movies. Like this and Infinity War. I have to rewatch Infinity War to kind of like think about it. But it actually takes a lot of cues from Man of Steel, which I like a lot. It kind of has this like impact action filmmaking that I've talked about before. And it has the same sort of thing that Man of Steel does, where Orm has a cape and Aquaman doesn't, which is also useful in Man of Steel because Superman has a cape and Zod doesn't. So you can track them at very long ranges. But I feel that to a certain extent with the the legibility of things. I really appreciated a lot of this stuff because it has the kind of DBZ thing. This is the appeal, I think, of like this kind of impact action filmmaking, where a lot of emphasis is put on sort of like the destructive power of these guys. And like anytime Aquaman gets like slammed into rocks and like the rocks crumble, like those kinds of things, I don't know what it is, but like the destructibility of the environment just makes it feel that much more kind of explosive and powerful, which I like a whole lot. I think the Italy scene is better for this, and also the well, to be honest, kind of all of the fights sort of like have this, but the Italy scene is very much like the best when it comes to action. That is clearly, I think, the pinnacle of the action filmmaking in this movie.
Yeah, no, I actually really like the undersea battle, like the fight with the Brine Kingdom.
Oh yeah, at the very end, dude.
Yeah.
This is another part of what I think if there is anything that Aquaman does truly like stellar above and beyond, I think the kind of mythos. It's probably the first movie I've seen since any like of these Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies, which I would include The Hobbit, even though The Hobbit is a bad set of movies or whatever. That like there's just so much you want to know or whatever. Like just the idea of like this army of crabmen who have these giant crab siege engines that are whipping lava, they like these lava catapults, and they're hitting like troop carriers that look like sea turtles. Just like all of that stuff I thought was so evocative, right? If I was like a 10-year-old, I would be doing that thing that I did in Star Wars.
It's almost exactly a Star Wars fight, right? Like it's the big armies fighting, and then there's the two Jedi that like fight in like an epic spear battle on top of the boat.
And that's exactly what it is. In the same way that like in Star Wars, in like in Return of the Jedi, right? When you see A-Wings and B-Wings, and you're just like, wow, what cool, like these are so cool, and you want to go home with your A-Wings and B-Wings or whatever and like make your own Star Wars battles. That's exactly how I felt about like the Brine Kingdom and the Fisherman Kingdom and stuff like that. I thought that stuff was awesome.
No, absolutely, right? Like, and we don't get a lot about them, but like I remember thinking the movie is like, if my favorite kingdom would be the Brine Kingdom, I would definitely like because like they're like such different aesthetics, right? And there's definitely like a piece that you can identify with each of them, right? It's kind of like almost like a Harry Potter house. Obviously, they're less fleshed out, but like you like all that variety is just like super neat, and like there's like that hint at like a larger world that you want to like dive into that you don't get with,
exactly.
You don't get that with most other superhero movies because most of them don't take place and don't have this like other worldly feel to it, right? Like you get this a little bit with Wakanda, but most movies are like set in our world with like the superhero being the difference, whereas like this thing the whole kind of concept is foreign, which it does that very well. I will agree. It was super fun that way. I really actually enjoyed going through all of the kingdoms. I wasn't sure we were going to get to see all of them. Is that a thing from the comics?
That is kind of a thing from the comics. There are 7 different kingdoms, and like Atlantis sort of like unites them or whatever, but they are not so like the Fisherman Kingdoms being literal mermaids, and the Brine Kingdom, these are inventions of like in the comics all the Atlanteans are just Atlanteans of different kind of like stripes or varieties. Like the trench exists, but like the trench is something that is entirely kind of outside of Atlantis or like Atlanteans, whereas like the narrative of the movie portrays the trench as one of the kingdoms of Atlantis that like biologically devolved into these like ravenous, murderous, fish dudes.
Yeah, I thought that was a clear call to fucking the Army of the Dead from Lord of the Rings. Like
yeah.
I was actually expecting him to like use his fish talking powers earlier with them. I was actually sad that it didn't get like a fuller moment where
the trench is, so a lot of this pulls from the Jeff Johns 2011, which makes sense. Obviously, Jeff Johns is like a big producer in these DC movies. 2011 Aquaman run, and the trench is the first story in that run. And I'm actually a little bit sad that they didn't do kind of like a more. It's tough. They do so much stuff in this movie. This is like, God, like so many things in this come from so many different places, right? Like King Atlan and like the Trident and all this other sort of stuff. But like the cool thing about the trench is that they are just insanely ravenous animals, essentially. And Aquaman has to drive them to extinction by sealing the trench itself with a volcanic eruption, in order to kind of like stop them. But like, even though that is the win, this is like the truth behind Aquaman. This is what makes Aquaman Aquaman. Like he is the kind of person that like takes responsibility for the tough decisions, and it always sucks, right? And so when people talk to him about the trench, they go, "Wow, it's so cool that you were able to like stop these ravenous monsters." But he just sees himself as someone that drove a species of life to extinction, and how that sucks, and it makes him feel bad. You know what I mean? And like, those hard decisions, those tough decisions, and those bittersweet decisions are the things that kind of like make him in a way. And I wish there was more of that in this movie, which there kind of couldn't be because he wasn't really king yet. And this is a movie about him assuming that responsibility in the first place. So and part of this is about his relationship with Orm and stuff like that. But yeah.
So kind of along those lines, as an avid Aquaman fan, how do you feel about this movie's relationship to the Aquaman lore at large? Like, what is both your opinion? What do you think kind of the popular opinion will be? Because you obviously thought that Man of Steel and BVS were an interesting take on Superman, but a lot of people felt like it was like a betrayal of the character.
I would say this is very much in line with what we get. Like, this is a true Aquaman story in the same sense that BVS, I would say, is a true Superman story, right? This isn't like, Superman has a lot more mythos to him than Aquaman does, but the reason I think BVS is a true Superman story is that kind of doubt about Superman's sort of place and omniscience and godhood is something that comes up in the comics all the time, in the comics that I like about Superman all the time. And in the same sense, this is like a very true Aquaman story, which is like true to the character, but it does like discard some things that I like about, like, so for instance, one of the things I really love about Orm in the Aquaman comics is that he is not lawful evil and he is not power hungry. He is kind of definitionally lawful neutral, right? In the comics, Orm is so dedicated to Atlantean law that when he finds out Arthur exists, when he finds out he has there's an older brother who has the birthright to the throne, he sends Atlanteans to go get Aquaman and bring him to rule He is king of Atlantis, right? And he says, I am not the rightful king, my brother is the rightful king, even though he's been on the surface world. Our laws say the firstborn child is like the rightful king of Atlantis, sort of thing. And he goes and he gets Aquaman, and Aquaman comes and becomes king of Atlantis for 5 years, which I think is very cool. Like, it is the kind of subversion that I like. This is not just a power hungry, fascist essentially, or authoritarian, right? This is somebody whose prime allegiance is to the laws of Atlantis, right? And even in the Throne of Atlantis storyline, which is about Orm leading an attack on the surface, the same sort of thing happens where like a surface world attack happens and Orm responds by sending a huge tidal wave and then invading the surface world. But the thing is that Orm is essentially a patsy. I won't spoil that storyline for anybody, but there is a third party who triggers the attack from the surface world, and he knows that there are Atlantean war plans that say, if the surface world ever attack us, this is how we will respond. These war plans, by the way, were written by Arthur when he was king of Atlantis, and Orm is just executing on them, right? And so when he comes to the surface world, all he is doing is being an executor of the lay of the land that he has, or the lay of the sea in this case, right? Like, he is just executing the law as he sees fit, right? And the culmination of that is Arthur re-exerts his kingship, right? And Orm yields the kingship, and Arthur takes it back. But then the betrayal that turns kind of Orm into the vengeful Ocean Master is that Arthur then says, okay, you are also someone who sent a tidal wave to Boston and killed thousands of people, and I'm giving you to the surface world in payment for your crimes. And that betrayal, right, is the thing that kind of like creates Ocean Master for Aquaman for the first time. And that's a really tough thing to do, to execute on, because there's a lot of subversion there, right? It is, we expect, you know, someone like Orm in this movie to use a false flag.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was hoping, like I saw it, and for a second I was like, oh, that's neat. This isn't just like, you know, like Orm's shitty and like, you know, takes power. It's like, no, like, but then like I mean, like, oh, he's gonna have done this himself, and I had really wished that it had been something like that, where
no, me too. And I think that there's a hint of it at the end, obviously, when Aquaman says, let's talk, and when Orm, you know, hugs his mom, right? Like, I think that is kind of one of these moments of like, not redemption, but like an indication that Orm is softer and not as definitionally evil as he appears to be.
Right.
In a lot of ways,
he's very Loki-like.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, like, part of this, the other half of the Throne of Atlantis, which is a Justice League storyline, is that the Justice League is on the other half of it's not Orm versus Aquaman. It's Aquaman in between Orm and the Justice League, because like Batman and Superman are like, this guy is clearly a fucking supervillain. We need to treat him like a supervillain and beat him up and throw him in prison. And Arthur is like, no, it's not that simple, right? All Orm is doing is executing on the war plans I wrote when I was King of Atlantis, kind of thing. Like, it's more nuanced and difficult sort of thing. And Aquaman eventually just has to bow to the will of the Justice League. That's the reason that he turns Orm over, because, you know, he's a member of the Justice League and he gets kind of outvoted. And I think that like that sort of bittersweetness, this is the stuff I always love about Aquaman, right? Like, it is always that kind of like, you know, taking responsibility for like the tough, hard decisions. And this is what I'm hoping that if they do an Aquaman 2, when they do an Aquaman 2, because it just made $1 gazillion in China before even opening in the US, that's the stuff that they focus on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Is Ocean Master, is it also a title in the comic books? Because like I was like, that's stupid, but that's probably just a supervillain name.
That was another piece that I kind of wish that was a little in the comics. Orm is a sorcerer, which Atlantis is the center of magic on Earth, and so it's always kind of portrayed like where the modern surface world embraces technology, Atlantis embraced magic.
Yeah.
And so Orm is an incredibly powerful sorcerer, which is kind of like the source of his powers. And he has a crown that allows him to control water, and his trident allows him to control storms. And so like he shoots like lightning and shit like that. And I was kind of hoping that they were going to do something with that. It didn't seem like it, but I was like, maybe on an off chance, because like it seemed as though, I don't know. I mean, they were very clearly like, once he has the allegiance of the four kingdoms, the power is the army. But I was sort of hoping that was going to be the twist in the third act, right? Like they fight the Brine Kingdom, and then the Kraken shows up, and Aquaman is too late. The Brine King swears his allegiance, and Orm gets these superpowers. And now Aquaman with the Trident of Atlan versus Orm with his now Ocean Master abilities. That's like the big escalation, in the same way that, like, you know, Doomsday is the big escalation in the third act of Batman vs Superman, or Superman versus Zod is the big escalation in Man of Steel.
Okay, so sorry, just to be clear, Ocean Master is then like a title that he inherits in the comics, or
no, he just calls himself that.
Okay, yeah, because like I was gonna say, like, it sounded really stupid as like the person, like, you know, the title. But I figured it was just a sideways way to get his...
That's the name of him as a supervillain. Ocean Master and Black Manta are like the two big real Aquaman supervillains. There are a couple of others, but like not to the same sort of like level.
Yeah.
So, you know, they were just kind of like using the name. I really did like the design. That is one of the most like true to comics designs I think I've seen.
For who? Black Manta?
Honestly, kind of for everyone.
Okay.
like maybe since like Doctor Strange, just because like the fish scale, like the orange and green, the golden green.
Honestly, I thought that was kind of silly. Like
really,
well, him stepping out with like the weird like the classic costume just like felt off. Like I can't quite put my finger on why, but like it was like this doesn't feel like this Aquaman. This feels like
yeah.
But you know that's just personal stuff. Like
I mean, go
on. Sorry.
I think part of it. I don't know. It sold it for me, but it only sold it when it got into close up. There was one part where they got into close up and they could really show you the scale mail of it, which is like the point. This is Atlantean armor, and I think that it looks, like the Super Friends version of it looks very dumb because it doesn't have I don't know, there's no texture to it, so it just kind of looks like somebody drew fish scale on a t-shirt or something, or on like tights. But like that's not what this is, which is good.
I
think it should look kind of more like armor like that. And so and then obviously Orm having that same sort of like fish scale but in like purple, and then having the fucking helmet with like the little fin crown or whatever. And then the pièce de résistance is the fin crown allowing Orm to emote. The moment where Orm like looks at Arthur or whoever he looks at and he like scowls in the metal crown is the best thing, because that's part of that's something that you miss out in the comics in a lot of ways. It's the same thing with like the emotive Spider-Man eyes. When it is a real practical mask that is just like rubber and doesn't move or whatever, you miss out on the ability to have that kind of emotiveness to it, I guess. And so the fact that they added this in clearly with like a CGI, I was just like, this is the best use of visual effects ever. Like just to let Ocean Master scowl as he's like screaming about bringing the wrath of the seven seas with him.
Fair enough.
I will say that one of the big subversions that I like a lot in this movie is that Arthur's parents get back together. This feels like a cool superhero subversion, because typically a parent is dead or both parents are dead. And so the resolution to this story being, oh, actually she's been alive this whole time, and the end of the story is that Arthur's parents get back together as like a reverse orphaning of himself, is a very neat, I guess, subversion to the typical superhero Uncle Ben, the Waynes, Jonathan Kent sort of thing.
Sure, I guess it's like a meta subversion, but like I definitely knew immediately when he's like, and like, and when they show him like out on the dock, when he's old, I'm like, oh, she's going to be alive, and she's going to make good on that promise.
So, okay, that's actually really interesting. That is also a detail from the comics, but in the comics, it is a detail of disappointment. Aquaman's dad dies, never seeing Atlanta ever again. And so I was primed from the comics to read that as a moment of just like lost longing that never resolves. There's no closure to it in a way. And I eventually figured it out, just kind of the way that they talked about like the trench and stuff like that. Like, oh, she was sacrificed, like she was sacrificed to the trench. And there was like enough doubt sort of like sown later. But yeah, that is a detail from the comics that is reversed explicitly. Because yeah, his Aquaman's dad does go out to the end of the dock, but he just never gets to see her again. And
fair enough. I guess it was a good subversion for the comic fans, but like for like
yeah, which is funny because typically the opposite happens, right? You don't bait and switch the comic fans. Typically, the comic fans know it beforehand because they know the resolution. Yeah,
which is it's funny because I mean, beyond like him standing at the end of the dock is like, she's definitely alive, and then like the moment she's like. I still believe she's like, and he's like, she's dead. I'm like, she's not dead. There's no way that he insists that she's dead and she's actually dead. Like the movies don't work that way. Like if that was going to be the twist, then he wouldn't know that she had been executed. He would find that out later. It's just like, like this is very rote and manga was disappointed type of thing. But yeah. Is that like, it's like the ocean, or the ocean at the center of the earth? Is that like a thing from the comics?
No. It is in a certain sense, because a lot of the both Marvel and DC have like underground worlds within the world. If that makes sense, where like dinosaurs still exist. In DC, I believe it's under the Arctic. There's like a big giant, like, it's almost like Ungoro crater or something kind of like that from like WoW, where there's like this steaming jungle of dinosaurs secretly, hundreds of miles beneath the Earth's surface. And then in Marvel, I think it's under the Pacific Ocean. It's like the Savage Land is kind of related to this stuff. But no, that is something that also very much came out of nowhere, like the Hidden Sea with dinosaurs. I love that stuff just because of how cool it felt from like an adventure story perspective.
Sure.
In a way, like, it's the same sort of thing of like unlocking the tomb or whatever in like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. There's something about like these long forgotten things, secrets about like our world, that is just like compelling in its own right. Even if it doesn't like make any sense, like there's no evidence of Atlantis or the Deserter Kingdom or any of this stuff.
So honestly, I think it was like the big thing for me was like it seemed like this like spacious island underwater. It's like I think we get a wide shot of it, and I'm like, it's this big thing, and they go to the shore, and it's like, hello, I am Aquaman's mom, and the cave that you need to go to is 15 feet that way, and this is all you will see of this island. And I was like, okay, I guess we're going back now. Which is fine, I felt like maybe
it provides a good. I guess that's how Orm gets his plesiosaur, since he rides on a plesiosaur, which is an extinct dinosaur.
Yeah.
But there's also giant undersea crabs that are massive and not real, obviously. So who cares?
Yeah. No. It's just one of those things that it was not that it was like unrealistic. It's just that like it felt like they like put this like big tasty treat in front of us, and it's like you don't actually get to enjoy this. Whereas like we are going to show you like this the smallest piece of this and then leave. And I think that part of this is that I think this is part of informed by some of that early dialogue was so like quick, and like instead of like doing like a scene where he explains who the whose grandfather was, who Black Manta's grandfather was, they just kind of like say it's because I feel like they like just had too many things they were trying to do in this movie, and so some things needed to be cut into dialogue in short pieces.
Like somebody has to do the exposition or whatever.
Or somebody has to be handled in exposition rather than in a scene.
Yeah, so when we first got out of this movie, you said, buddy, how can you like this movie? Because there's just like bathos everywhere.
Yeah.
And I want you to know that I went to go see Aquaman again that night, because I saw it first last week on Saturday in advanced screening, and then this week again on Thursday. I wrote 3 pages of notes about bathos in this movie.
I would love it if you were like, he's wrong, and I'm gonna go watch it again and see it. Just
no, but so this is something that I think is really like interesting, and I actually do kind of want to break down a bit. The thing that I said afterwards about like bathos in Aquaman is that almost every moment of high drama is allowed to be high drama, and there are not really jokes at the expense of the drama, even if there are jokes in the middle of the drama, if that makes sense. Does that make like is there a distinction there that is real, or do you feel like I'm off the mark?
So I obviously I only saw it once, and I wasn't taking notes when it happened. So maybe I'm like maybe I'm misremembering it, but like I feel like maybe I'll accept that there's a theoretical difference there, but I feel like that's a high bar to clear, right? Like that, like any joke in the middle of the drama is going to in some way undercut the drama by it being a moment of levity in the middle of it. And I'm not saying that it's impossible to maintain a level of drama through that. I just think that like it's really hard to. And
yeah, because I was comparing this a lot. I rewatched a bunch of the Marvel movies in preparation for this. Like I rewatched Thor 3 and Black Panther, and I think Thor 3 has a ton of bathos, and it really gets on my nerves. because like I think the biggest moments of highest drama are typically undercut by bathos, right? Where like Bruce Banner says something about how awesome he is as the Hulk, and then he jumps out of the plane and bounces off, and his like limp body bounces off the bridge, or whatever. And then 2 seconds later, he hulks out anyway and fights like the wolf. That is like true bathos. That is about anticlimax, right?
Right.
At the expense of the drama. You think that the drama is about to happen, and then it doesn't, and that's funny, but it also kills kind of the drama. And I feel like there are things that are like, so I was thinking about this in comparison to Merc, the Atlantean commando who has to dunk his head in the toilet in order to survive after Mira severs his line. Would you consider that to be bathos?
Yes.
Okay, because I think the difference there is that like that's like a bit of slapstick in the fight, and I do agree to a certain extent that that any joke provides a contrast and a juxtaposition to any drama in the middle of a fight. Like when you have this like small slapstick beat inside of the fight, it kind of undermines the tension a little bit. But I feel like that is permissible and appropriate in a way that, you know, the Hulk jumping out of the airplane and bouncing off the bridge isn't. Or another example would be like when Thor and the Hulk are about to fight in the arena, and he goes, yes, he's a friend from work, right? Like that is a moment of bathos that also drives me nuts, because it is essentially making fun of the audience being invested in the hype and the build up to a big Thor versus Hulk rumble. Do you know what I mean?
So I see what you're saying, and I think I've got a theory as to like kind of our divergence on this. And I think that it's you, like, I will agree with you that the moments that you tend to dislike more, I think, are like harder undercuts. But I think the difference is I thought a lot of these moments in Aquaman weren't that funny. And so I think that's worse to me, because at least when you get the bathos in a Marvel movie, typically, I think they're really funny, and it like makes up for it, I guess. Or like that's the thing that you know I can recognize as a preference in myself. Whereas when it happens in Aquaman, I feel like those moments aren't that funny, and so it stings me harder because like you get the cut in the drama.
You don't even get a laugh out of it. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Like yeah.
You get the cut in the drama, and even though it's not as a severe cut, it's like with a bad joke, so that feels worse to me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But
I definitely see your point.
I also feel like most of the moments of like big high drama were allowed to play without any sort of bathos, in the same way that like, you know, the big high drama of like this Hulk versus Thor fight. At the end of the day, like Merc shoving his head in a toilet he's not a very important character, and it's not a part, you know, it would be different if this was something between Black Manta and Arthur, but like the whole fight between Black Manta and Arthur is dead straight and full stakes. You know what I mean? There is no moment where, you know, I don't know. Like,
there's the part where he apologizes to the Italian grandma.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Where he says "scusi" to the Italian grandma. Yeah. That was funny. But like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I felt like I was just writing all of these things down where like Manta gets the knife, has no bathos in it. Aquaman and Black Manta meet, there is no bathos. Black Manta swears his revenge, has no bathos. These are all from the same scene, I guess. Orm and Aquaman meet, has no bathos. Aquaman learns his mother is dead.
Wait. Aquaman and Orm is undercut by Mira saying, "Your brother's clearly an imbecile."
That was really. I don't know. That was not. I mean, I guess I think it was funny in an abstract sense, but it was like also very in character. Like
it felt like
there
it was
wasn't
supposed
an
to be a
anticlimax
joke.
there.
Like,
that's
how I read it. That it was supposed to be a joke.
So, no. So even if it is a joke, right? Like I don't think it's like anticlimax. In a certain sense, by that definition, everything is bathos.
Okay, so you know, I feel like
maybe
I'm not fully understanding the
now I need to look it up.
The definition of bathos, and you know, I have mostly been working from a definition of like jokes in the middle of drama undercut the drama.
Yeah. So the true definition of bathos is an effective anticlimax created by an unintentional lapse in mood from the sublime to the trivial or ridiculous.
Okay.
And I do get that for for instance, for the toilet thing, right? Like, I think there is like a degree of bathos there in the sense that like the sublimity, the sublimation, I don't know, who knows, of the fight between Mira and Merc is undercut by that or whatever. But I feel like the thing with Mira, she just really believes he's an imbecile, and it's funny, right? But I don't think that it's like it's creating an anticlimax.
Okay, no, so I will grant you that. I still kind of, I mean, I think this kind of feeds into this kind of difference between us. Like it appears that like what you really get hung up is that anticlimax aspect, which I totally understand. And for me, again, it's a direct result of like me not liking the humor as much. And so I guess the problem I have is less excuse me, pure bathos and more and more just kind of like that you know, level of humor aspect. I also think
a piece of it is that like the honeymooners aspect between Mira and Aquaman, which I like a lot and I think is very good. I think if there's anything about the characters that I think the characters are overall very good in this movie. And if I think the plot is weak in so far as it's just kind of predictable, but that's okay because it makes up for it kind of on the back end with stuff like the world building, the action filmmaking, and crucially, I think that the dynamic between Mira and Arthur works insofar as like she just doesn't take any of his shit, and they have that kind of almost like a rom-com kind of like contrarian bickering relationship that eventually kind of coalesces into something better once they have been allowed to change one another, if that makes sense. And so that to me just fell right in line with the kind of like with what we had seen with. In fact, I would actually make the argument that is a core part of Mira's character arc, because I think insofar as I think her character arc is kind of, you know, she is entirely motivated by stopping this war for Atlantis because she doesn't want to see the casualties that it's going to bring to the Atlanteans. And she kind of comes around to Arthur's point of view on the surface world, and that he is a real person who has real emotions and can teach her real things, right? Like, I think it's entirely in line with all of that stuff, it feels like to me.
Yeah, that's fair. There were a couple other things I wanted to highlight before we got out of here. Or a couple of things I just wanted to kind of throw out there. One, like this is like kind of like nitpicky, but like I thought it was kind of weird that like that Ocean Master was willing to like trust Black Manta with with the Black Manta stuff, right? Like it felt very much like Orm was very much, those fucking surface dwellers. What Ponce is, right? And he's like, here, have our most advanced technology, and you're in charge of an elite commando unit. Go for it. I was just like, that feels weird. Like,
yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, I think I actually really like that moment where King Nereus is like, no, like you can't harm my daughter, right?
Right.
Because it clearly sets up a sort of political bridge that Orm needs to cross, but he can't do it publicly, which is why he has to kind of like set up this, this thing with Black Manta, because Black Manta can harm, he says that, he's like, you can harm them even if my people can't, or
so
whatever.
I would have bought that if the people with Black Manta weren't other Merc people, right? Like, like it feels like you just should have sent his, like, you said his name was Merc. You just should have sent the mercenaries to go do that, rather than involve Black Manta.
So Merc's name is M-U-R-K, like murky water.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's like a minor character.
Okay.
He really hates the surface world, and he got his hand chopped off, which was actually like a neat thing to see in the movie, because like it happens in the comics, and then Merc replaces it with like something I don't even remember, but like, yeah, he's like a badass I hate the surface world commando that when Arthur is king of Atlantis, he kind of has to like contend with, because obviously like that's like part of the political drama about him being king, is kind of dealing with people who hate the surface world and like do want to execute on the war that Orm couldn't, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of that stuff with Black Manta. I love his little like tech montage. I thought that was, like that was cool. Um, and I just really like Black Manta in general. I'm glad that they're doing like Black Manta in the second movie as set up by the post-credit scene, though I have to say I am forever disappointed that Lex Luthor did not show up and recruit Black Manta, because that's what I wanted so badly.
Who is the conspiracy theorist a character from the comics?
Yeah. So Dr. Shin, is another kind of like interesting, tough decision kind of character for Arthur. Dr. Shin is the person who. Okay, so Dr. Shin has always believed that Atlantis is real, right? And when Arthur was first kind of coming of age, he is brought to Dr. Shin to figure out what all this stuff is. And Dr. Shin is like, oh my god, you're half Atlantean, so you can breathe underwater and you're stronger and all this stuff. So essentially, kind of all the stuff that happens with Volko is stuff that happens with Dr. Shin in the comics. But then the thing is that Dr. Shin wants to publish his findings, and Aquaman's dad is like, no, I'm not going to let you reveal my son's crazy, superpowers to the world. And so Dr. Shin goes forward anyway and reveals it publicly, but only conspiracy theorists take him seriously. And so he is simultaneously a person that like deeply betrays Aquaman. He's also the person that gets Black Manta sent after Aquaman in like the very first place, that ends up with Aquaman killing Black Manta's dad. But also but that's all in the past. That's all backstory. And then in the present, Dr. Shin is very remorseful about that. And so everybody hates him. Mira hates him. Black Manta hates him. And all of these other kinds of things. But he like expresses his regret truly to Arthur. And Arthur accepts it. And he's like, yeah, like I know that you're sorry and I accept your apology, kind of thing. But that's always like, that's viewed as like a big moment of weakness by like everyone around him. And so you as the reader know that Aquaman is doing the right thing, but he's being punished for it anyway, which is part of what I mean about like these bittersweet things, right? Like he's doing the right thing by sealing the trench, but he's punished for it anyway. He's doing the right thing by turning Orm over for killing thousands of people, but he's kind of punished for it anyway, sort of. Or however that stuff kind of looks. So yeah, so that is the relationship with Dr. Shin. I'm really interested to see what they're going to go with for Orm and Black Manta are like the big pillars on which Aquaman exists. The third pillar is King Nereus, who is Mira's dad. But the relationship between Mira and Aquaman is very different in this movie. In the comics, she has like a Mara Jade thing where she is tasked by her dad to assassinate Arthur while he is king of Atlantis, and as she's like getting close to him in order to like land the killing blow, she realizes that he's not so bad and that her dad is a meanie, and so she like turns on him or whatever. And so it kind of feels like they have blown their load a little bit when it comes to like the big Aquaman stories. The other one would be Aquaman losing his hand. But even that is like a pretty minor villain named Charybdis, like the whirlpool or whatever. So I have no idea what they're gonna do for like Aquaman 2, because they basically took like the 50 best comics from recent Aquaman and they put them all in this movie. They did the Trench, they did Black Manta, they did Ocean Master, they did Mira and King Nereus. It's all in there, so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm very excited for the stinger in a way of Aquaman saying, "When you're ready, let's talk," because I like when Orm and Aquaman work together, and I like when they kind of subvert in a way that sort of like Loki or like Killmonger kind of like relationship between usurper and usurpee. And I do hope that they kind of lean heavily into like lawful neutral Orm rather than lawful evil Orm who's trying to like undermine his brother and take power or whatever, because that I think is a more interesting. I just think, we've seen Loki and Thor across 3 movies, across like 6 movies by this point. I would like to see. I kind of want to see like the subversive aspect of that, where like Aquaman is able to redeem and come to terms with his half brother.
Yeah, no, I'd like to see that too, mostly because like that was one of my disappointments with Ronan the Accuser and Guardians of the Galaxy is.
Yeah, I know. God, Ronan the Accuser, right?
Yeah, we get to see Ronan again in what's the Captain Marvel.
Yeah, Captain Marvel. Yeah, I hope they do him justice. Ronan the Accuser is one of my favorite Marvel characters. So, let's hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's everything for Aquaman, right? Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, I could talk about this movie for a long time.
I'm sure
but
you could.
I feel like we covered the important stuff.
So first thing for the week is I'm going to go over the D-Box aspect of Aquaman, just kind of like a transition thing, because it's not really like related to the movie at all. But I saw this Aquaman on a D-Box. It's kind of like a very minor roller coastery type thing. You can adjust it to your preferred setting. I had it turned up to the maximum so I could get the maximum like experience, and you kind of like wave around a bit. Gotta say that I didn't feel like it was super impactful, or super like, it didn't make the movie, I don't think, that any better for me. I feel like I much would have rather been in like one of those big recliner chairs that you get in like some of the fancier theaters. That being said, I could see it being really good in like a movie where it was like a car movie, right? Like a Fast and the Furious, or like a Fury Road, or
right, neat.
Yeah, I think those could work well. I don't think it obviously it definitely wouldn't work great for like a mumblecore movie, right? Like Manchester by the Sea in a D-Box would be like not a great experience. But I think that I think that it's probably not like, I don't think it was worth the extra money. I don't think I'd be doing it again except for like a racing style movie or something like that. But other than that, I haven't been. I played some Smash this week. It continues to be Smash Brothers. I haven't done a lot else. How's your week been, buddy?
So along with seeing Aquaman last night, I saw another movie that came out this weekend, Bumblebee, the inherent eroticism of the bee, the Iron Bee, because it's just the Iron Giant, but with Bumblebee. So I saw Bumblebee with friend of the cast, Warren. It was a whole thing. It is the best Transformers movie, sort of by default, but it's also very funny because
it's a prequel, right?
So it's a prequel, but it's funny because it is simultaneously set within the Transformers cinematic universe, in the sense that there are specific references to aspects of the mythos that were created for the Transformers cinematic universe, including John Turturro's character Simmons, including Sector 7, which is like the alien hunting like group from the Michael Bay Transformers movies. These things don't exist in the Transformers comics. They are like entirely inventions of the movie franchise itself. But it also is in complete in a complete adversarial relationship with those movies, because it, I guess, retcons, it counters the continuity. None of the stuff that happens in Bumblebee makes any sense if you like have a passing, not even a passing resemblance, because you do, I guess, have to look pretty hard. But if you understand the Transformers cinematic continuity, which I do, because it's hilarious and it doesn't make a lot of sense, that continuity is completely destroyed by the existence of Bumblebee, and it just doesn't make any sense, which I find absolutely hilarious, right? Even Aquaman, which is doing a similar thing, I think, which is trying to kind of like distance itself from like a franchise that's not particularly well liked, right? Aquaman doesn't spend a lot of time talking about Justice League. They'd have one mention of Steppenwolf and what happened with Steppenwolf, and that's basically it. He has the same trident, he does the half naked thing or whatever, but overall Aquaman is not very concerned with the events of the wider DC extended universe. But Bumblebee very much is. It also just doesn't seem to care. So it's in this weird place of it is simultaneously throwing in all of these Easter eggs for if you know the Transformers cinematic continuity. Oh, cool. Look, this is Simmons when he's young in the 80s. Oh, cool. This is what Sector 7 looks like. Oh, cool. You know, like, or whatever. But also at the same time, completely undercutting all of that stuff. Otherwise, the movie is not great. It's fine, I guess. It's fine. It's just kind of normal. And it's one of those movies, it's a little bit like Ragnarok in this way, where like the whole second act is just kind of dicking around while you wait for the plot to catch up, and you keep cutting back to the villains doing villain stuff, and they're like, oh, we're gonna get Bumblebee, oh, we're gonna get him so good, but but that doesn't take place until the third act. It's about an hour and 45 minutes until like the villains and Bumblebee interact for the first time, and we really kind of kick things in high gear.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Even though Michael Bay is traditionally considered one of the better action filmmakers, the action in this movie is much better than it was in any of the Michael Bay Transformers movies, and that comes as no surprise because the character designs on Bumblebee and the other Transformers in the movie are legible, just because they're all primary colors. They just cover him in these plates that are yellow. So when you see yellow, you know that's Bumblebee, and when you see red, you know that's a bad guy, or when you see blue, you know that's a bad guy. They also they changed the filmmaking style a little bit, but they do so I talked about like impact action filmmaking, which is all about like maximizing like the impact of these fights, right? So what you see, for instance, in Aquaman is Black Manta shoots his laser beams from his eyes, and the camera watches the laser leave Black Manta's eyes, hit Arthur, and then that momentum propels Arthur off of a roof or something like that, and you watch Arthur fall the whole way, right? So in a sense, what it becomes is like the subject is Black Manta acting on the object, and there is a transference between them using the lasers. And I like that a lot, and I think that that's very good. The reverse of this is what I guess I would call like subject action filmmaking, which is the same sort, which I don't want to say is bad, right? It's just like a different sort of flavor. So a lot of the Marvel movies have this, kind of before the Russo brothers got their hands on things, and like John Wick, for instance, is a very good example of like subject action filmmaking. And it makes a lot of sense for John Wick because he's using guns, and guns are not about like momentum and impact. They're just about shooting things. So watching John Wick shoot guys is cool. But what ends up happening is when you do this in a movie like Bumblebee, where there's a lot of like fisticuffs, even if it's between robots, and they're big giant robots that are like causing like mayhem and destruction, it just looks like the robots are fighting the frame. There's this whole thing in the very beginning, this isn't much of a spoiler, where like the Transformers are fighting on Cybertron, and it's cool to see Cybertron for the first time in the cinematic universe, or maybe not for the first time, but the camera is just rooted on Bumblebee as he's spinning around and shooting his gun, and it's supposed to look very cool, but the thing is he's shooting his gun off screen at bad guys you can't see, or you can only see a part of, or you see for half a second and then the camera whips around, because it is just entirely rooted on Bumblebee the whole time, which kind of sucks. There's some moments of cool things like with transforming, stuff like that. I guess I won't spoil any of that stuff because I want this to be like a spoiler-free review. But yeah, so that kind of sucks. Also, it's very dim. They light the scenes very weird in the sense that they kind of want to do the Zack Snyder thing where they shoot everything against black. They shoot, like, all of the big fights happen at night because at night allows you to have high contrast between, in Zack Snyder movies, it's the red of Superman's cape or something like that. And in this movie, they do that, but like the lighting is so bad that Bumblebee just kind of gets muddled into dark shadows in the background. And so even if you have something that looks good or is cool, you a lot of the times miss it because of these lighting issues. It's all very weird, especially because it's all VFX anyway. So I don't know. Yeah, that's Bumblebee. That's my spoiler free. It's my spoiler free review of the Bumblebee movie.
Well, okay then. So yeah, so given that you said it kind of like fucks with the continuity, is like Sam Witwicky just like not like a thing that anybody even references anymore?
Yeah, no. So in the first Transformers continuity, I think we watch Bumblebee come to Earth. No, we don't watch Bumblebee come to Earth. We watch Optimus Prime come to Earth. Whereas Bumblebee ends with Optimus Prime on Earth, like chatting with Bumblebee. And the other thing is that in Transformers 5, it's revealed that Bumblebee helped fight the Nazis in World War II, but Bumblebee couldn't have, because in this movie we watch him crash land in upstate California in the 80s. Not to mention that we see his voice box get ripped out, which is a detail from the movies. Obviously in like the TV show he has his voice box, but like the thing in the movies is that Bumblebee has his voice box damaged, and so he has to talk through the radio or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. It's just crazy.
I wonder if they're gonna like try and result like Transformers 12 is just going to be like, these were actually different versions of Bumblebee.
I just don't understand, because it's like they have the thing about Bumblebee losing his voice box is he's like fighting a Decepticon and he's losing, and the Decepticon like holds him over a cliff, and Bumblebee is like, I'll never talk, because they're like, where's Optimus Prime? He's like, I'll never talk, and then the Decepticon is like, oh really? And there's this like scene that's supposed to be agonizing, and it is actually kind of like affecting, where the Decepticon like reaches into Bumblebee's throat and rips out what you assume to be his voice box, and he can't talk anymore after that. And then they like drop him off of this cliff, and he gets like all battered and shit. And so that is a detail that only is useful to a movie watcher, right? Because Bumblebee only has lost his voice box in the movies, and they put so much like attention and weight on this moment, right? Like this is the moment where Bumblebee, the beloved Transformers character, loses his voice box. Oh, it's so sad. But you're also in the middle of a fight that doesn't make any sense in the greater Transformers continuity, where it's like, well, didn't we just learn in the last movie that Bumblebee was secretly fighting fucking Hitler? How does this make any sense? I guess it just doesn't.
Yeah, and I also feel like that's one of those things where like you don't need to explain it, and explaining it just kind of like, why didn't anybody ever fix it?
Yeah, it is very much that. It is a lot like explaining. It's a lot like the Solo movie thing, where they're just like explaining trivial bullshit the whole time. That was cool when it was implied, and now it's just like, oh, come on a little bit.
And like I think there's a level of it, like like seeing the Kessel Run, that's okay. Like meeting Chewie, a little bit worse, but I can live with it. Explaining why he's named Han Solo, like.
I know. Oh god. Yep. Explaining the dice. A lot of things on the Solo movie. This isn't the Solo movie podcast, but yeah, it is very much the same thing. Anyway, besides this stuff, I find that stuff funny, and I find some of the, I think the cinematography, the lighting and stuff was not great, but the core drama of Bumblebee works in the same sort of way that, like, I would say the core drama of Aquaman works. Like, these are pinprick things where, at the end of the day, I buy into the story of a girl and her car or whatever. And so I'd say ultimately Bumblebee is a good movie, but flawed. Very much on par with Aquaman being a good movie, but flawed. Though Aquaman is better because the action is better, and that's the big selling point for either of these movies, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. So, question for you: Did you ever play Ark?
No, yeah, but you've been talking about this thing with what, Atlas?
Atlas, yes.
So Rachel really loves Ark, or doesn't really love Ark. She hates Ark, but she played Ark. She played a whole bunch of Ark for a long time, and also friend of the cast Warren played Ark. And eventually they got really frustrated with the game because something about it was stupid. A bunch of stupid stuff happens. Who knows? And they kind of put the game down. But now they're coming out with a new game Atlas. Is that true?
Yes. So the big kind of shit show with this is it was supposed to come. So they announced it on. They announced it at the Game Awards. It was supposed to come out on December 13th. Then they delayed it to December 19th. I had kind of forgotten about it, and so I started paying attention to it around December 9th. Like, December 18th, I was like, oh, yeah, that game's out. I should check it out. I'm like, oh, it's December 19th. I thought I had misremembered it, but then I saw that they had delayed it. So it's like, comes out in 12 hours. I'm like, neat. I said, weird that you can't pre-purchase it, but okay. I come home the next day. I'm like, all right, this game, there's no buy button. That's weird. And I'm like, I wonder what's up. And so I checked their Twitter. Nothing on their Twitter. Nothing on, nothing on any of their official pages, no news announcement. I'm like, this is weird. They have a link to the Discord, so I open their Discord. I poke around. Everybody's like, yeah. So what's up? And then within half an hour of that happening, they put out another trailer and they say we've decided to delay it till Friday, which was yesterday. And so immediately everybody's posting a quote from the lead of the studio that's we were bad at our communication with Ark and we don't want to make that same mistake again. We want to be more communicative with our players. And as kind of the posting that is see, they're not telling us anything. They just kind of because this was 6 to 8 hours after it was supposed to have been released, right? So I'm like, okay, whatever. It's supposed to come out on Friday night. I'll check it out then, right? See what's up with it. So, I get home Friday. It's still out, and at this point, they had already announced. It's we're delaying it till noon today. It's so what the fuck is happening? So I actually just checked, and it's out now. It is 37% of these are positive, so it's mostly negative. And I'm scrolling down now to see if they are people are savaging it. It looks like it doesn't work right now.
Okay.
Yeah, the game doesn't seem to work. People are claiming it's a reskin of Ark. People are saying that one of the key features was that it was going to be one world with 40,000 people in it. Apparently it's 150 people across 270 servers that don't cross over, right? And it's in early access. So, if I'm going to be charitable, I would say that these are things that will eventually be true that aren't true now. But it very much I looked at it and I was like, this looks neat, right? This is the type of game that is up my alley. So it would be the type of thing that I would be willing to kind of explore. But I obviously, like I said, I just kind of started looking at these reviews right now. So I am going to keep my eye on it, but I'm not going to play. I wanted to see if you had kind of insight into that kind of Arc drama.
I have no idea about that Arc drama. I do know some friends who still play Arc, kind of as a more advanced Minecraft in a certain sort of way. But I never graduated, I guess, to that kind of level of survival game. Though I did want to ask your opinion about another thing that was announced recently. I don't think at the Game Awards, but whatever. So have you seen this new, not Fallout, God, the fact that I want to call it Fallout is fucked up though. The new Far Cry, A New World or whatever.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, it's
what are your thoughts? Give me your rundown on the new Far Cry.
It looks neat. I'm vaguely excited for the extension of the old story, aspect. It could be neat. I'm gonna reserve judgment for when it actually comes out, I guess. I thought Far Cry 4.
Yeah, I know, right?
5, whatever,
same feeling.
Whatever Far Cry that we both played in the beginning of this year. I thought it was all right. I thought it had a lot of these kind of system. So I've got this working theory that open world games kind of this mold have this kind of recurring problem where the game isn't like this because you can go through the game in any order. The skill tree, like as you play the game it does not like you scale through the challenges. Like the game just continually gets easier, which I think is bad. Because it's not like you get like new challenges that you need new tools to deal with. It's you get new tools to make the old challenges easier. And a lot of the existent challenges come with like just kind of like cutting off pieces of your toolkit, which I think is fundamentally unfun design. And I think this is just kind of like the way that skill up systems work in this open world game. Like the most fun I had in Far Cry 5 was the first area I did, which was Jacob's area, and it might be that Jacob's area was better produced, but I think most of it's that like it was the first area I did, and therefore I had the most challenge with.
It's actually kind of funny because I have two feelings about this. One is that sometimes when challenge is modular, it doesn't feel good. In the same way, like Skyrim and Fallout 4 have kind of been hit for this, where like everything just scales to your level.
Yeah. So
it's a little bit like why even bother? You never get to feel powerful, even when you keep powering up. And something that the original Far Cry 3 did, which I thought was neat, was that when you hit endgame, you opened up a whole second island. Like you started on the jungle island and you were fighting Voss, and then you opened up the second island, which was kind of where you by the time you defeat Voss, you're pretty powerful, and by the time then you go to that second island, and the bad guys are a little bit stronger, but they're still like plateaued, and you still are getting stronger progressively yourself, and so you're kind of working through in a way, kind of like churning through you're like churning through the content, but you still get to feel like an uber powerful badass. And some games have hit that for me, and some games haven't. I keep meaning to go back to Dragon Age Inquisition, actually, just because like the Dragon Age trailer has me been like, oh yeah, I remember how much I love that game. And Dragon Age Inquisition felt that way to me. Like it felt good when I was leveling up and getting more powerful. Even while like some of the enemies were scaling, some of them weren't, and you were fighting these dragon fights that were like mechanics based and stuff like that. All that kind of good shit. So yeah, I don't know. I'm very interested to see Far Cry New Dawn. In a way, the Far Cry series is kind of one of my favorite game series. Not as a fan, but as like an onlooker in a way. I like these games a lot, but I'm not. I wouldn't stand for them in the way I stand for like Mass Effect or Dragon Age or Total War or anything like these. And so I very much want to play it, and I want to see what it kind of comes down to.
Yeah.
And I almost sort of hope that it is a new, better Fallout in a way, especially because 76 is apparently Garbo.
Yeah, I'm really hoping on Outer Worlds for that one, which is the Obsidian game.
Yeah. I know. I remember Outer Worlds. Yeah.
No.
Excuse me.
But yeah, I'm definitely willing to give it a chance. I'm probably gonna wait for the reviews on that one and make the decision at that point. But yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit about some Hearthstone news that I think is interesting. I just kind of want to like address really quickly. So Rastakon's Rumble came out 3 weeks ago, like 2.5 weeks ago, and on Monday at midnight, they announced in 8 hours they were going to be nerfing a couple of cards. I think it was like 6 cards total, maybe 5 cards total. That were targeting things like I had talked about the Shutter Walk problem earlier in the cast. They got rid of the ability for Shutter Walk to be an infinite combo that just repeats itself over and over again.
Did they get rid of the ability to? I thought they put a cap on how many effects it.
So they did do that, but you could still have the infinite Shutter Walk thing happen because each individual battle cry is kind of discrete, and as long as it's under 20, it's fine. The interesting thing that they did is that Shutter Walk was using a card called Serenite Chain Gang, which has a battle cry that says summon a copy.
Yeah.
They changed that battle cry to say summon another Serenite Chain. So now it does not summon another Shutter Walk, it summons a Serenite Chain Gang. So the infinite combo is no longer possible where you're popping Shutter Walks back into your hand for however much mana, for 1 mana, and then playing them like over and over again. They also nerfed the Druid's ability to ramp, Wild Growth is now 3 mana from 2 mana, which is gain an empty mana crystal. And then Nourish is now 6 mana from 5 mana, which is gain 2 mana crystals. Most people think that Druid is going to be garbage just because of how much it relied on ramp and the ability to use these 2 cards to kind of like rocket itself forward.
Yeah, I was never under the impression that ramp was like that broken that like it warranted that kind of nerf.
Yeah, I mean, part of it I think is I don't know, I don't really know. Part of it is that they also gave Druid some just like really powerful defensive tools that I don't think that they should have. I might make the argument that ramp is not that big of a deal, but like things like Wild Growth, that things like Spreading Plague, which allows you to summon a bunch of taunt minions, or Oaken Summons, which allows you to summon a creature from your deck and gain a bunch of armor, summoning taunt minions like that. I think that's the problem with Druid. Like, Druid typically... it's okay for a Druid deck to want to win with combo, in the way that, like, a Malygos Druid wants to reduce the mana cost of Malygos, and then play him for cheap and like batter you in the face with a bunch of Moonfires or whatever. I think that's like a win condition that they're like, okay, that's a fair win condition. But like the Druid's ability to ramp to that win condition and play defensive to that win condition are both kind of overpowered.
Okay.
And instead of going for the Druid's defensive abilities, they instead go for the Druid's ramp. I would have probably gone the other side and said that Druids were gaining too much armor, that their taunt creatures were too powerful, that the ability to summon a big ass board of taunts was too powerful. But they made the opposite decision. I do think ramp is powerful. And I almost sort of wonder if this is something that they're doing like for the future.
Yeah, I could also see it being something along the lines of like, when you're nerfing defensive like if you have to choose between defensive options and ramps, there's a bunch of way to have defensive options so you can like kind of widen that field. It feels like ramp, there's like very few cards that let you do that, and so like I think typically card game designers tend to want to shy away from like, this card must be in your deck in order for it to be viable, and it feels like if ramp is the way that you want the Druid to go, then like Wild Growth kind of becomes mandatory, which is probably...
Yeah, and they also do this thing, which I think sucks to a certain extent, where the existence of ramp allows Druid to kind of just ignore having like a well-built curve.
Right.
Because basically every deck has Wild Growth and Nourish in it at 2 mana and 5 mana before they're nerfed to 3 and 6. And I think like the problem with that to a certain extent is just that you can just have the most expensive bullshit ever, because your first couple of turns are going to ramp. Maybe you'll take a bunch of damage from aggro decks, but they're on 4 mana, you're on 7, and now you can just throw down a whole bunch of defensive options, 3 or 4 times until there's nothing that they can do to really like blast past your wall and get in sort of lethal before their combo goes off.
Yeah. I think part of this is having a single mana system, right? Like Magic has the complexity of having multiple.
Oh yeah,
mana
like
types.
Multiple different types of mana. Yeah, definitely. They also they changed Kingsbane Rogue, which was Kingsbane is a card that keeps all enchantments you cast on it. And they used to have an enchantment called Leeching Poison, which would give your weapon lifesteal, but they basically realized that once you get a big Kingsbane of like 10 attack, you're just lifestealing for 10 every turn, and it's kind of impossible to kill you unless you can burst 30 for, like from nothing sort of thing. So they changed that so that it's just lifesteal for 1 turn only. And then there was one other change that I can't remember. Oh, and then they nerfed Odd Paladin by getting rid of the card Level Up, which turns all your Silverhand recruits into 3/3s. RIP Odd Paladin, which was using the upgraded hero power to summon 2 1/1 Silverhand recruits every turn. That was legit, and I'm so glad that it's gone because it was bullshit.
So are these the Rastakhan Rumble nerfs?
Yeah.
Okay.
The interesting thing about these nerfs, though, is that they were announced at midnight. They came out 8 hours later at 8 a.m. And on the next day there was a tournament.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, there's been a little bit of talk in the community about it, where some people were essentially like, you know what? Most people who play Hearthstone are casual players, and these casual players are getting stomped by Odd Paladin, which is a deck that has not changed since January of this year, and that's bullshit, right? We should, and the other thing is that the holidays are coming up, right? So if they did not publish these nerfs on Monday or on Tuesday, which is when they come out, they probably don't get enacted until people come back from the holiday in January, right?
Which is bad.
And I would rather have 3 weeks of a fresh meta that is not watching the same decks that are a year old trounce everything that just like all of the new stuff that just came out. And it sucks that this happened to the esports, tournament or whatever. But like that's just kind of like the cost of doing business. And then the other side of that is obviously, esports are the highest tier of competitive stuff in the game, and they're screwing over all these people who have to set completely new lineups with no testing in the meta or anything kind of like along those sorts of lines.
I feel like the easy answer to this is, you play the tournament on the old patch, and I don't I don't see, like, I feel like Blizzard should have that. Is it an official Blizzard tournament, or is it like an unofficial tournament?
It is an unofficial tournament. It is it's like a dream hack kind of thing.
I feel like at that point, like, I think it's kind of like shitty, but I think at that point Blizzard can just be like, "Fuck you, I don't care," which is like the negative side of the esports should be independent point that I brought up last week with the Heroes of the Storm type thing, where you're kind of at the whims of the developers' patching cycle. But I think you've specifically talked about this before. I don't know if I fully agree with you on it, but like there is some aspect to esports as being able to roll with patch changes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely do think that is a part of the esports, right? Like, so there actually was like a push in Hearthstone in this direction for a while, and there were a whole bunch of tournaments, and the tournaments were deck building tournaments where you didn't walk into the tournament with like your lineup of decks already completed. You would walk into the tournament and it was a little bit like Arena or like Magic the Gathering drafts, but typically like they would give you a full collection, and then they would say you need to you can't have any of this card in your deck, or you can't have any of that card in your deck, or you have to have at least you have to have at least 5 beasts or something kind of along those lines. And it challenges people to build decks on the spot and create a meta and like refine a meta on the spot. And I think that was very cool in in League of Legends sort of thing, which is like the kind of context of my earlier position. Like, yeah, like I think adjusting to patch changes is a part of that esport, right? And I like that, and I think that's good, but I don't think anybody could make an argument that adjusting to changes in a single day unannounced kind of at the whims of the developer is like a positive thing.
Yeah.
No matter what way you spin that, I very much agree with you that like that is as a casual player of Hearthstone, I'm very glad that they made these changes because they have positively affected my ability to play the game. But it is a shitty thing to do from like that esports.
Yeah, I mean the real answer is that they should have just announced this change a week ago. Then said that the change is happening, on Monday, and that would have been fine. Because, at that point, like, that's like enough for you to be like, look, tournaments, you're going to have to deal with our bullshit, but at least you've got some advance notice to deal with it. So, that's just kind of like, I feel like a lot of disrespect, just kind of like shitty, right? Like, but, what are you gonna do? I don't think it's the worst thing Blizzard has done this year.
Yeah. It's funny to see how much people are happy for Hearthstone versus how disappointed I guess they are in World of Warcraft.
I think this has been a bad year for Blizzard.
I very much agree. I don't think it is. I don't think it's deserved to a certain extent. In like I have on this podcast talked before about how I think people are overly harsh about BFA in a way that I don't think is fair. Even if there are fair criticisms buried in there, but when it comes to Diablo Immortal, yeah, when it comes to Heroes of the Storm, sure. Even when it comes to things like adding Destiny and Black Ops to like the BattleNet launcher, some of the microtransaction kind of stuff. It's not great.
So speaking of, just kind of last thing that I want to hit is, do you have a strong opinion about the $25 mount?
$25
there's like
mount?
a Fox mount that you can like a
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, what?
I saw it and I was like, this, like, I saw somebody complaining about it basically, and I didn't realize it was newsworthy. Like, I didn't think it was newsworthy because I had seen it in the launcher. It's like,
right,
like, yeah, it's a $25 mount, and yeah, that's kind of like bullshit. But I'm not gonna buy it. It's not like it's like a, it's not like it's like a power thing.
Yeah.
Is that making any waves? Are there other $25 mounts?
I think basically everyone who plays World of Warcraft at this point has made their peace with it. There have been mounts in the cosmetic store for a long time. They first started with the Celestial Steed, which people really freaked out about at the time. I do remember that. But I have always been of the opinion these mounts are fine. I own a couple of them because I bought them with gold, essentially, like that, which I think is a good way to handle it, by the way. Like, the fact that I can take my in-game gold, turn it into Blizz Bucks, and buy a mount is neat. I don't know.
So I've got an interesting question then, based on that, right? Like,
yeah.
When you could see that Blizzard, like, you could see, like, kind of sidestepping this question by making it be like some absurd cost in gold that like nearly practically necessitates that you that you kind of like sell, like that you go buy credits and like sell them into gold.
Yeah.
Or like the reverse, right? Like every kind of like of these prestige high gold mounts are all cash shop items. So like if I guess I'm just pointing out this kind of seems like this weird distinction between like, essentially any mount is a cash shop mount if you sell time on the auction house. And like any cash shop mount is a prestige mount if you turn your gold into real money. And that seems to be like a weird kind of separation there. Do you have any thoughts on that, I guess?
I would have thoughts on it, I think, if they did one or the other, but because they kind of do both, like, there is simultaneously the $5 million Brutosaur, the 5 million gold Brutosaur mount, which is, a current, the current WoW token is probably something like 150k. So the current WoW token is 122k, right? Which means that you would need, 9 tokens to get to 1 million. So you need 45 tokens at $20 a piece in order to get to, you need $900 to get, like, the Brutosaur mount through real world money. Okay, yeah. The cash shop mounts, you need 2 tokens to get enough money to get one of the cash shop mounts. So, those mounts are all effectively 250k. Right. So, I don't know. Because they do both sides, I feel like it's effectively fine. Though they always, none of the cash shop mounts are $175. You know what I mean? And none of the cash shop mounts are actually priced differently at all. They're all 250k by kind of in-game standards or whatever. But there's a lot of variance inside of the game, and I would much rather have the Brutosaur be a 5 million gold mount that is a reward for earning gold on the in-game economy than a $900 cash shop mount that is a reward for, I guess, keeping a good steady job and getting real world money.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because I feel like that's like almost like a diversionary tactic, right? Because they are effectively both, right? Like every mount is effectively both. It seems if it almost feels like the reason that the Brutosaur is like an in-game cash or a gold mount is to kind of obscure the fact that it's like a ludicrous amount of like real world money.
Well, so I mean, I think the Brutosaur is solving a problem of gold inflation,
sure.
Right? In games like this, you always have to introduce big gold sinks, and so a Brutosaur mount is just to say, hey, here's a really cool reward for playing the auction house really strong, because otherwise, you're just like inflating all these prices, and it throws the economy out of whack, and that's really bad.
Yeah, no, but I feel like if somebody came, if somebody like came and said, this is a $900 mount, and that's what this is, and you know, they're just putting it in game to obfuscate it, I feel like that person would have a point. I don't, you know, like, I think you're right. I think you could probably convince me that it's what it actually is. It's a gold sync, and the fact that it kind of interacts this way with the real money, the real money transaction aspect of it is it's kind of like a unfortunate coincidence, but
like a side effect.
Yeah, but like, I think that's kind of like a problem that like you have to grapple with, and like obviously no one's talking about it right now. So maybe it's not a problem right now, but I feel like that's like a time bomb.
Really? I don't know. To me, it seems like if it was too hard in the opposite direction, I would be pissed about it in a way.
What do you mean?
I don't know. Things in game, especially big vanity items like mounts. Yeah, they're that like.
No, but if it was a $900 mount, you'd probably not be happy with it, right?
Yeah, but I think there is a meaningful like that obfuscation is not in a like those two things are not equivalent to me, right? Like I think there's a meaningful difference.
That's my entire point, right? Like they are equivalent. They are literally equivalent. It's just like a psychological trick to get you to think that it isn't. And like I said, I think I agree with you. I think that's not the intention that Blizzard puts out there, but like, you know, it has a real world cash value that you can do through the Blizzard interface.
No, I mean, sure. Like I understand. So, okay. I understand that the two are equivalent, but I don't think those two economies are equivalent. And I think you do have to have gold sinks in order to maintain in-game economies and have them be fair, essentially. Do you know what I mean?
No, like again, I'm not disagreeing with the kind of like the gold, like the economy concerns from that perspective. I just think when you inherently hit these problems when you mix in RMT. I don't know, like if it was unofficial RMT, like then I think you've got either like that it's you know, you can say that like it was never supposed to be this way, but I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me.
I mean, part of this is that this stuff has all been backfilled, right?
Yeah.
like we've had in-game shot mounts for a long time, but the ability to trade in for BlizzBucks only happened 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so there's like a certain, I don't know, like there's just like a, because those walls came down, which I think is a good thing, right? Because it means kind of everything is purchasable, including Hearthstone packs and Destiny 2. It also sort of like opens up a certain, I don't know, maybe like to a certain extent, I actually kind of think that keeping the WoW token at a good price is maybe even a piece of this, right? Where like you have real things in game, so that if you are like, you know, if you are a multimillionaire and $900 to you is a lot easier than farming 5 million gold in game, right? And you buy a whole bunch of WoW tokens, that drives down the price of WoW tokens for people who support their playtime purely through in-game gold. Do you know what I mean? And so it also kind of has like a beneficial equalizing effect from that other side of things. I don't know. You know, I think to a certain, I guess I would say that on its face, yeah, if they introduced a $900 mount, I would be pissed about it. But maybe after thinking about it, I would be like, that's fine. You know what I mean? Which is a weird thing to think about, but that's essentially what I'm arguing.
Yeah, and I think I disagree with you, but I do think we're way over time. So maybe we'll revisit this at some other point. You know, with that, I would say if you'd like to email us what you think about Aquaman or $900 mounts or anything else we talked about on this podcast, feel free to email us at somederpsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@somederpsplaygames.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/somederpsplaygames. You can rate and review us on iTunes. We would appreciate it very much. Leave us comments anywhere. We love them. You can follow us on YouTube. I think I forgot to upload last week's video again, so my apologies for that. That won't go up till after Christmas. Neither will this one. But I'll get back on that. But I think that's everything I had. Buddy, do you have anything else that you wanted to promote?
I have nothing else I am looking to promote.
In that case, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.